Hi everyone, I'm Peter Perot. I work here at the downtown library. I'm in charge of circulation, everything that checks in and out of the library. I love to read. You can see me reading when I'm on lunch, if I'm at lunch here, if I'm at lunch out at a restaurant. On my days off at lunch, I'll be sitting there eating my food and I'll have a book open. I love reading. I love reading thoughtful books like Kurt Vonnegut books, sci-fi books like Ender's Game or 7 E's or Station 11. I love reading horror like Stephen King, and fantasy books like the Lord of the Rings books. What I love about reading, is you get lost in the story. You get to get lost in the adventure and the action of what's going on, especially in a good book. And then you become enmeshed with the characters. You start rooting for them, you start hoping for them, and if they're evil, you start rooting and hoping against them because you're just caught up in the story. And by the time you finish the story, you're like, that was good. I love that story. And you recommend it to all your friends. This is not that story. This book, Red Rising by Pierce Brown, is part of a trilogy. Everything about books that I love is not in this book. It's boring. There's nothing that goes on that hasn't already been done in a bazillion books before. The characters are, well, again, boring. This book is so boring that by the time I reached page 100, I thought, I don't care what's going to happen next. I don't care about any of the characters, whether they live or die. So at that point, I just said, I'm done. That is my anti-recommendation of books. That's Red Rising by Pierce Brown, and it bored me to tears. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Lucy, and I'm a page here at Downtown Chandler Public Library. Now, I like science fiction adventure books, and so it is with great sorrow I present my Wretched read. It's called Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. It was published this year, 2021, in May. And it is in the science fiction adventure genre, and it features the hero, Dr. Ryland Grace, who wakes up to find himself in an unknown spaceship, in unknown space, and complete memory loss. Through a series of flashbacks, we find out that he is in fact on a mission through unknown space, a Hail Mary mission, if you wish, to combat an extinction-level event that will wipe out humanity. So why don't I like it? It should be perfect. Well, the hero is a genius-level scientist who is also a third-grade science teacher, and so his conversation is peppered with "gosh darn it" and "what's this doohickey here?" And it's very tiresome and tedious. The plot itself is linear, it's predictable, and rather patronizing. Dr. Ryland Grace becomes very tiresome very early, and although the end couple of chapters are engaging and somewhat satisfactory, it is not an adult fiction book. However, if the hero was a genius fifth grader who found himself in such a situation and solved the problems using cool math and science principles, it would be a very fitting addition to the juvenile fiction section. So, let me suggest a solution. A righteous read, if you please. This is actually The Martian by Andy Weir, published in 2014. Yes, I get the irony of this. So here the hero wakes up abandoned on Mars by his crewmates who thought he was dead. He must now survive the very hostile environment of Mars whilst trying to contact Earth and knowing all the time that it will be several weeks before they can get a ship back to him to rescue him. The hero is an engaging, wisecracking, if profane, scientist who leads us very engagingly towards a very satisfying end. Give it a try. I hope you enjoy it.
My name is Marilee Kim. I'm a library aide at the Chandler Downtown branch. As a library aide, I work the reference desk. I also check in books, work our call center, and things like that. My Wretched read is going to be Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. The basic plot of this book is two twin witches, Amelia and Vittoria, who live in Sicily, Italy. One day, multiple other young witches in the city are being found murdered by an unknown assailant. After her sister Vittoria becomes another victim of this assailant, our main character Amelia calls upon Wrath, one of the 7 demon princes of hell, to help her solve the case. I initially discovered this book through a friend who is a booktuber, who went as far as to say this book was her favorite of 2020. We both love fantasy, romance novels, so I thought that this was going to be great for me. The main reason I find this book wretched is because of the world building, or lack thereof. I didn't realize this book was set in the 19th century until after the fact. The author also typically just tells us about fantasy without really showing us. She'll say, oh yes, there's witches in this world. Yes, there's demons and vampires and werewolves, but I didn't see those things. She just told us they existed. Overall, the writing was just flat and uninteresting. Similarly, for a book that's about witches, I didn't see any magic. I wanted to see them doing magic, casting spells, but I can really only think of 2 instances that these witches were casting spells. While the world building of the fantasy elements were not very strong, the location of this book was definitely glaringly obvious. This book is set in Italy, and the author does not want you to forget it. The main character and her family own an Italian restaurant, so we get these paragraph-long descriptions of Italian recipes and Amelia thinking of new dishes she can make, and it really had me thinking, is this a fantasy book or is this an Italian cookbook? Not sure. Lastly, and probably the most egregious thing, was that the end of this novel made absolutely no sense. I'll try not to spoil too many things, but the character of Wrath at the end inexplicably just turns into another character. And it wasn't really explained that he was changed. I know based on other reviews that I read that I was not alone being completely confused by that plot twist. In conclusion, I was expecting a thrilling and adventurous fantasy romance, but 80% of this book was just Detective Amelia on the case, and the Demon Prince Wrath just kind of there, not answering any questions and not helping in any way. It did have a few moments that were fun sprinkled throughout, but overall I found myself skimming through the pages just so I could find out who the murderer was in the end. So sadly, I would not recommend this book to anyone.
Hi everybody, I'm Nanette Tennant. I work at the Downtown Chandler Public Library. I am a youth library assistant, and I am in charge of the Ready Set Preschool, Ready Set Kindergarten programs, and I work at the desk on occasion also. I read the most wretched read, The Death of Mrs. Westaway. This book had so much potential. The story of a girl raised on the poor side of town. Mom read tarot cards for a living. Mom dies, girl takes over the business. You know, sounds really good, barely feeding herself, broke. She borrows money from some goons. They come to her house. They're gonna break her legs if she doesn't pay. You know, so it sounds really good, getting better. Then she gets this miraculous letter telling her she inherited all this money because her rich grandmother died. Well, then she's like, okay, do I tell these people or do I scam these people and get some money, you know? Because great plot, right? No. How many times can you tell somebody the girl is broke? I think I figured it out about 6 chapters in. She's broke. But it continues on and tells you many more times she's broke. And then she uses all these long words and it gets boring. Now, Reese Witherspoon, she said she couldn't put the book down. Well, I did. Many times. I even skipped some chapters and pages, and you know what? I still figured out what was going on in the book. It ended okay, but it wouldn't make me cry if my copy got left on the train, okay? But the plot was so good. I would give it 2 stars. You know, the book was written okay. But if you want a really good book, you need to read The Binding by Nicholas Wolfe. Now, this plot was awesome. The characters were great. It's told in the view of many characters, but it is a horror. Proceed with caution. There are murders. There's supernatural. There's time travel. There's everything in one book. Remember, The Death of Mrs. Westaway, Wretched read. The Binding, good read. Thanks, everybody.